Now I'm gonna round out some of the harder edges. I'm still roughing this out. Let me take this off so you can see. So I kind of carved in the areas for the fingers and the thumb, and it's going to be like this. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking out the sort of like hard angles, and so I'm going to round this out and smooth these over, and I'll probably do something like here. And this is going to be, I don't know what this is going to be, but I'm going to make it like a spoon thing. And I realize it kind of looks like a hockey stick. So once that's done, then we'll get to the sanding and fine sanding. And so it's pretty comfortable right now, but the wood is a little rough. So I'm going to round things out. One thing to remember too is that you can make your ergonomic form where it feels good, but also remember, you know, when you handle it, your hands are going to be all over this thing. So you want to go through and then round out any sharp edges that you have. Alright. Okay, so I've smoothed most of it up until the end here. I still don't know what I'm making, but what I'm going to do is scoop this out. So I'm going to start as if I was making a spoon, and I'm going to dish this out a little bit. And I want to do that not because I'm want to make a spoon, but I want to dish it out just because you might have a similar situation. So I want to show you how to attack it. So the way to do it is, you know, if you draw out the shape roughly, and I'm going to make mine sort of dish out in the same shape. So it's going to be a concave spot like that. And the way to do it is with a chisel. And if we had round chisels, it'd be ideal, but we don't. So I'm going to get a chair. So I have it clamped in, and I just put it up against the bench pin. That way it doesn't move around that much. It might move around a little anyway. Make sure your clamps are nice and tight. So as I do this, I'll show you which way to hold the chisel. And what you don't want to do is have the chisel pointing downward, because what that does is it'll just dig and dig, and it's hard to control, and you'll end up digging too much into the grain of the wood. So when you're scooping something out, you're gonna have it like this, and the idea is to like come in, and if I was just doing it by hand, I would do that, but this might be a little rough to do it. I guess I can. So I'm going to do it with the chisel. We'll just go faster. So what you'll do is you'll chisel it out to about halfway. You don't want to chisel in too far, because then it's hard to get that upslope. So what I'll do is I'll chisel it about halfway in, and then I'll turn it around and then chisel it the other way, and just more or less rough out a shape. So that took me about 15 minutes to just scoop it out, and it went really easily. Now let's see if you can even see this. You can tell, let's see, but it got dished out pretty good, and that's about all I'm going to do. So now we have to deal with how we're going to smooth this out, and that presents a problem because we can't get to it with really any of the files. Maybe your round file, you could get it a little bit, but for the most part you're just going to have to get sandpaper and sand it out. So of course you want to start with the heavier grit. You don't want to start with the 220. You know, I wouldn't even start with the one, you know, like the 150 or 120. Start with the 80, and if you have a 60, it's even better. And so you can do it with your hand, and of course that's going to take a while. One thing you can also do is you can take the end of your chisel and you can wrap the sandpaper around, right? And that creates sort of a firmer, more or less rounded shape. Then you can get in there and it'll sand a little bit easier. Okay, so it's roughed out. Everywhere there was like a corner, like a hard edge, I just took and kind of filed it off. And I think I got it all. I could probably take this down a little more, but for the most part it's done, except for the sanding, you know, the fine sanding, and just making everywhere that like you touch your hand nice and smooth. So I still don't know, maybe I'll use it to like bother my wife or something. So I want to show you how to start you know, smoothing it down. With the files that you're supposed to get, there's these files that have, some of them are half round, most of them are flat files, but you can take and go right over where you use the rasp, and you'll see right away what a huge difference it makes. And I think I could probably just go from this rasp to the sandpaper, and that, you know, just get it down to like an 80 or 120 finish. And if you have time, of course, you can sand it down even more so that it's you know, if you have time, you can get it pretty much to a polish just with sandpaper. Okay, so that's it, and I'll sand this a little bit. Alright, I'm done. What I want to do now is simply recap the tools that I used for this, and that way you have sort of an overall perspective on how this gets done. What I did forget is my drill. So what we did is we started with the drill just to make holes, and then started with the flat chisels and used the flat chisels to rough out the kind of like deeper areas, and including you know, the little paddle thing. And then I moved to the rasps, and the rasps I used this one because it has a half round on one side and then it's flat on the other side, and this one's round. So when the shapes were bigger, I could use this half round, and then when they're smaller, I used this smaller round rasp to get in and smooth out, you know, some of the inside spaces. Once that was done, I got the file, and remember, these files are they're multi-purpose, but they're really meant for metal, especially like non-ferrous metals like aluminum, that kind of thing. You can use them for steel too, But in this case, I used them to smooth out the rough grain that the rasps caused. And so I was able to get into most of the spaces using these, and the spaces that I had a harder time with, I just used sandpaper. So the sandpaper, when you use it, you have to get kind of creative. Most of this I just did with my hand, and you want to start with the lower grit. So I started with 60, and the 60 I used to take off most of the edges, and I got in there as much as I could to get the kind of inside spots. Then I moved to 80 grit, and the 80 grit, for the most part, this is all done with 80 grit. I didn't use 120. I could have used 120 or even gone up to 220, and I might do that later. But for our purposes, if you just get it to 80 grit, it makes a pretty smooth surface. So in making this, and one more thing, is the this part that I dished out, I also used I used the chisels first, and then because it's an interior space, there's like lots of little grooves and stuff. So I used the wood carving to smooth this out. And one thing you should remember is that it doesn't take off as much material, so you have to be really, really patient and just take off little pieces at a time. And then when it was smooth enough, I just took sandpaper and I smoothed it out. That does take some time. I think out of the whole thing, I spent the most time sanding out the interior spaces. But for the most part, it was basically the 80 grit that I used to like smooth stuff out. Okay, so before I forget, I want to remind you to just be careful, especially when the deadline is due. It's coming up next week, and so I don't want you to rush and cut yourself. So just go at this, be very, very careful. The one thing that I even found myself doing was I would hold it and then I'd have a chisel like this, and it made me think, uh-oh, I better let them know that can be pretty dangerous. So the way to avoid that is always position. Hold on. Always position it so that you're cutting away, right? And that'll help you, keep your fingers and stuff out of the way. Okay, so that's it. Oh, and wear a mask. I know you have one, so wear it because the dust, it gets up, especially when you use the finer grit sandpaper, and you definitely don't want to breathe the dust. Okay, so I hope your project's going well, and please hit me up if you have problems or questions, and I hope your project comes out great.